Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and returning to the show, Trevor Sikkema, the lead NFL draft analyst for Pro Football Focus. And Trevor, I've got the PFF draft guide right up here in the window. It's slowing down my computer because I've been flying through it. Truly one of the best resources for draft season. So greatly appreciate all the work you put in so I don't have to. But as you join the show here, we've got some rumors that I actually need you to address before we get into all the draft stuff. And one of them I did not see coming, which was about Trey Lance. Rich Eisen always does a craziest rumors that I heard at the NFL Combine, and he started off with the Vikings and Trey Lance. So you've been doing the draft analyst thing for long enough to have evaluated Trey Lance, watched the entire Trey Lance thing play out. Is it a crazy idea if the Vikings lose Kirk Cousins in free agency for them to consider bringing in Trey Lance?
This was the craziest thing that he heard at the combine for a reason. And I cannot say that I had heard this one before. We've talked about Justin Fields' destinations, Baker Mayfield, where Kirk Cousins is going to go, what's going to happen with Russell Wilson, right? People have even thrown out, man, Geno Smith restructures his contract, gets a little bit more tradable. I got to admit, this is the first time I've heard Trey Lance's name within this conversation. And I guess with good reason, right? Things don't go really well in San Francisco to the point where they're looking to move on from him. They trade all that draft capital to move up to pick him as QB3 in that 2021 draft, and they lose him for basically nothing in return, right? I think Dallas traded a 5th-round pick for him. And so that's just, I don't really think that speaks volumes of a guy who can absolutely come in and start right away that you feel really good about. Like, I don't necessarily hate it as a bet. When Dallas traded for him, a day 3 pick for Trey Lance, I went, all right, okay, like, I guess that makes sense. I think there are other teams in the NFL who probably would have done the same. But then to come around a year later, nothing's really changed. Same situation. And, Rich says on his show, oh, maybe you can increase the price to get him from Dallas because they've already picked up his roster bonus, so they're already paying him. Maybe you just kind of up the price a little bit, 3rd-round pick, 4th-round pick, something. It's like, all right, well, what exactly happened in the last, 6 months, 3 months, whatever it's been since the Trey Lance trade, where you think, all right, let's up the value on him. So, look, I thought that Lance was alluring when I was grading him coming out of the 2021 draft, but I didn't have him on the same caliber as Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence and even Zach Wilson. I had him as more of that QB4, QB5 in that class, and I thought he had a really big arm, a lot of really great tools as a passer, but he just hadn't played a lot of football, right? He had 1 year as a starter. That was his true sophomore season at North Dakota State. Didn't get to play his junior year because of the COVID season. I think they played that one game that felt like more of an exhibition than anything else. And then he didn't play in San Francisco, hasn't really played in Dallas. And so the guy just has not played much football at all since 2018, since high school, basically, right? And I think that's where we have to go all the way back to. And so if you're taking a flyer on him, sure, maybe. But to sit here and say, yeah, let's go all in on Trey Lance and trade a 3rd-round pick, which does Minnesota have a 3rd-round pick? I felt like
They
Rich.
do not. No, they
Okay,
do
okay.
not.
So,
It'd
so
be a
Rich said
fourth.
that, and then somebody was like, I don't even think they have a 3rd-round pick. So, I mean, to kind of up the price and say, yeah, we're losing Kirk Cousins, but we've got Trey Lance. That's all good to go. I don't really think that they're even going to come to that conclusion, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could make some sort of case of like, look, if you brought in veteran X, traded almost nothing for Trey Lance, and drafted Michael Penix, then all right, well, you've sort of done like what San Francisco was doing with their quarterback situation last summer, which was Sam Darnold. Let's see if Brock Purdy's arm is healed and if he's the real deal after the small sample of playing, and see if Trey Lance can take that step forward. But there is so little evidence of Trey Lance actually playing football that it's hard to even say, well, I saw this one game or this preseason game or whatever to make a case like that there might be something there with Trey Lance, and you're going to ask him to come in and then compete for the spot. I mean, maybe if your plan was to trade for him, keep him on the bench for a couple of years. But normally, if a team like San Francisco is bailing on you with Kyle Shanahan at the helm, and then even Dallas is bailing on you, that means that nobody is seeing anything there. And even if he were to come in and even if he were to play, And the ceiling was he plays like Daniel Jones, where he's sort of serviceable and he runs for 800 yards or something. Then you pay him or don't pay him. Like I really cannot make this one work at all. Aside from what it sounds like to me is the Vikings brass went to the combine and started asking everybody about every possible quarterback. And I made a list of all the possible quarterbacks, came up with like 20 guys, and Trey Lance would have to be on your list. But I feel like that Mean Girls quote, like, stop trying to make Trey Lance happen. Just everybody, stop trying to make Trey Lance happen. It's just not going to be a thing. It didn't work out. It was probably the hardest year in NFL history for evaluators to draft players, and San Francisco took their swing on upside, and it just didn't work out. And that's what Trey Lance is going to be in history, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. You look at that, even if you just independently looked at the situation in San Francisco, you mentioned you've got Kyle Shanahan there, who is proclaimed by many to be this quarterback guru, right? He's making it work with Brock Purdy. He's taking Brock Purdy to a Super Bowl. And they traded all of that capital to go up and get Trey Lance. Like, if there was any team in the world that was going to hold on as long as possible for Trey Lance to work out, it was going to be the Niners, and they've already moved on from him. Again, like I said at the top, for a price that was nothing when it came to a return on that trade for what they relative to what they gave to go up and get for him. So I agree with you. I think the larger point here, the fact that and I don't know who Rich heard this from. Like, was it just kind of like somebody in the league who was maybe playing a game of telephone, and all of a sudden Trey Lance's name gets brought up in a conversation where somebody goes, well, like maybe the conversation starts with, man, Minnesota's looking at every single option, right? And then he goes to tells his buddy, and he goes, man, I heard that Minnesota's looking at every single option, and then maybe they'll throw a couple names out. They go like, yeah, I mean, even Justin Fields or Mac Jones or something like that. And then that guy goes to tell his buddy, and Trey Lance just comes to mind because he's a backup in the league. And then all of a sudden that maybe gets to Rich, and Rich goes, hey, Vikings and Trey Lance. And so I feel like it was just a progressive game of telephone that probably got us to that point. But I'm with you 100%. The larger theme here, the actual takeaway from this bit of news, is that the Vikings are leaving no stone unturned. Even when they got to the combine, they said, yeah, I mean, we would love to have Kirk back, right? I mean, we're working to make it so. And it's ultimately his decision, but we would love to have him back with the Vikings. And so I think that, to your point, the list is 20 quarterbacks long of possibilities in Minnesota, because they know that they have an opportunity to really bring in whatever that next chapter is going to be. Do they want to run it back with Kirk? I'm not really convinced, right? Here's the thing. I don't think they want to be bad. So they're going to say, yeah, we're going to try to run it back with Kirk, all that, because I don't think they want to be terrible. Nobody wants to be terrible. But at the same time, they're picking at 11. They don't really want to go through another simulated season just to get a higher draft pick. I think they'd rather sit here and say, look, let's just use the draft ammo now, right? We got good quarterbacks in this class. New England might be willing to move back. Washington might be willing to move back. Let's offer a couple of first round picks and go get the quarterback of the future. So to me, I think that just as they are going through those exercises, you truly have to leave no stone unturned, because if you are trading 2-3 first round picks, you better be sure that this is not only a swing of the bat that you want to take for the prospect, but also that outside the league, like your pro personnel scouting is also up to par. You think that that's not the best option. Trading multiple first round picks up for a quarterback is the best option.
And just to be clear, to put the period on the Trey Lance sentence, if they traded nothing for him, I'd be like, okay, like that's
sure. Oh yeah,
that's
absolutely.
totally fine,
absolutely.
Right? Like, I mean, if you're giving up hardly anything, it was sort of like when Dallas did it. Like, does this make sense? No, but who cares? Like, you gave up, like you said, it was fourth or fifth or something. Like, that's fine.
I just love how you said that. Does this make sense? No, but yeah, it's just
yeah, but who cares? Like, what were you going to draft a long snapper with the 6th round pick? Whatever. No, actually, the Vikings have an elite long snapper. So, but I think that you're exactly right on that. They have to look at every single option, which could result in people saying, yeah, they talked to us about Trey Lance. That was weird. But they may have talked to 20 other agents, 20 other teams, because they know the reality that Kirk Cousins may not be here, which is rumor number 2. that I want to get your opinion on. Kirk Lanta. How do we feel about Kirk Lanta? Pro Football Talk put it out there. Florio wants to be first on the spot here with Kirk Lanta. I think we've all been putting this together for a very long time. It's a team that is in win now mode with a roster that they've built through being bad for a very long time. They have not been to the playoffs since 2017. And you know what? Tampa Bay Trey, everybody's saying about the NFC South is that Kirk's going to go there and win the South. And it's hard to disagree when you look around, you go, Derek Carr doesn't scare anybody. Tampa Bay has got work to do this offseason. We don't know if Baker's coming back. And the Carolina Panthers may someday get there, but they will not get there very likely next season. So it does make sense for Kirk to go to a team that could win right now and win that division next year if he comes back and plays like the version of himself. So what do you think of Kirk Lanta?
I think Arthur Blank, their owner, is fed up. I think that he is pissed about how the last, let's say, 3 years have gone for this team because, coming off of the Super Bowl that they had in 2016, 2017, coming up just short, struggling the next couple of years, not really be able to, not really getting back to those heights, having to move on from Dan Quinn. And I think Arthur Blank looked at that situation and said, okay, we got close with Dan Quinn, but we need to get over the mountaintop. And since then, they have kind of taken swings at the bat, whether it was Arthur Smith as a coach or particularly, I would say, the way that they were forced to move from Matt Ryan because of how interested in how they handled the Deshaun Watson situation. They wanted to take a swing of the bat at Deshaun Watson as big as what Cleveland did. And I think people often forget that. Atlanta was another team that was heavily involved in that. They were gunning for Deshaun Watson to the point where Matt Ryan was like, wow, okay, feel a little disrespected here. And then Matt Ryan left, and then they obviously got left at the altar, if you will, for Deshaun Watson, and they had nobody. They signed a bridge guy in Mariota. It didn't really work. They draft Desmond Ridder in the 3rd round. Maybe, okay, we'll take a flyer on him. It didn't work. I think Arthur Blank is sick of it. I think he's pissed. I think that he is going to take the biggest swing of the bat possible. I think they're absolutely going to offer Kirk the most or tied for the most money, right? They're going to make some team outbid them. And I think it's a really good situation. They could boast Zach Robinson coming over, the new offensive coordinator. Obviously, like Zach worked under Sean McVay and his offensive system while he was in LA. Kevin O'Connell was coming for Sean McVay as well. So they could pitch to Kirk like, hey, a lot of the stuff is the same. A lot of the success you had to Kevin O'Connell, we can have here with Zach Robinson. You got a new head coach in Raheem Morris, who's coming with a fiery attitude to prove, he is a head coach in this league after having a head coaching tenure that didn't go so well when, quite frankly, he was a scapegoat when he was given the head coach job in Tampa Bay. And I feel bad for him that it's taken him 10 years to kind of build that back up and get that behind him. But I'm glad he's got another shot. I think the defense will get better with him being there and him being the head coach. And so Atlanta makes a ton of sense. You got a good offensive line. You got Bijan Robinson. You got Drake London. You got Kyle Pitts. Like, all of that stuff makes a ton of sense for Kirk Cousins to go there. And so I absolutely believe that he is going to be in Atlanta's plans. They're going to take a really good run at him when it comes to free agency. And then if they miss out on Kirk Cousins, I think that Atlanta will be one of the most aggressive teams in the entire league to get up to even as high as pick number 1 overall. Like, I think Atlanta is genuinely going to call the Chicago Bears and make them say no. And they're going to do the same thing with the Washington Commanders, and they'll do the same thing with, I think, the New England Patriots as well to go up and get a quarterback. So it starts, though, with Kirk when we hit free agency, who there's a reason why these teams are being late, because it makes a lot of sense. And I do think because of that context of where Arthur Blank is coming from in the last couple of years, he's going to be aggressive to go get somebody good.
It's always fit so much better than a return to Minnesota based on where the rosters are in my mind. And if you go through all the teams, the Pittsburghs, the Vegas, the Denver, you just can't make any of them work quite as well as Atlanta for Kirk Cousins, the family connection that he has in Atlanta. But from a perspective of somebody yourself who used to cover the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, tell me, would you be afraid of Kirk in the division? Like, do you think that this is a move that makes Atlanta a legitimate contender?
Well, as a Tampa Bay guy, I said that they weren't going to win the division last year, and that proved out to be good. It turned out to be, the jinx, the curse, and then they actually did. So, yeah, I have no problem saying that again, because maybe it would happen. No, but in all seriousness, Kirk Cousins in Atlanta, I do think makes them the preseason favorites to win the division. I really do. Even with Baker Mayfield coming back, there was so much turnover in the coaching staff for Tampa Bay, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And, that was a big question mark with Todd Bowles when he took over for Bruce Arians is, were they going to be able to figure out on the offensive side of the ball? And Byron Leftwich was still there for a year. Tom Brady was still there for a year. And even that really did not work out well. I think they hit a home run getting Dave Canales and what he was able to do, especially in the last half of the season. Wasn't perfect, but they were really rolling. And I did not think that he was going to get poached for a head coach spot. He ends up doing so to the division rival Carolina Panthers, but it was more than just him. There was a lot of turnover. The quarterback's coach, I think the offensive line coach, like I think there was a ton of turnover for Tampa Bay. So even with a lot of those guys coming back, I say that to say Atlanta is going to start the year as the odds-on favorite to win that division, and they should in the preseason. So I think that, they become absolutely a formidable foe in the NFC South and could potentially even make some noise in the playoffs as well if they can do well throughout free agency, getting a couple of other pieces in there, and then really nailing the draft.
Yeah, I could very much see them being the division winner just based on where everybody else is. And then if you were to project it cynically, as I have been known to do on this show occasionally, I would guess that they go 10-7 and then host the home playoff game and then lose that home playoff game to a team that's better than them. So, I mean, I don't know. They do have a lot of weapons. I mean, there's a lot to work with there. And it's something that Kirk has really been missing since, I guess, 2020 is a running game. And with Bijan Robinson going into his second year, that and also they haven't had much of a screen game, a short passing game. It's really been, hey, Kirk, drop back, 7 steps and throw it downfield to Justin Jefferson. Whereas a tight end like this, a running back like this could actually take some pressure off of him that he's had in Minnesota with the lack of a run game, lack of a screen game in the last few years. I don't see the ceiling of that thing being a true Super Bowl contender, though. I see it much more as being a good team. It'll get Arthur Blank's club back into the playoffs, and then we'll forget they were there by the end of the year. But let's not count all the chickens before they hatch. I want to talk about this draft class with you because there's a couple of quarterbacks that everybody has different opinions on. In fact, we saw each other out in Indy, and the first thing I said to your friend Kyle Krabs was, how do you feel about McCarthy? That's what I want everybody to know. I want everybody to tell me, how do you feel about McCarthy? But something else I wanted to bring up with you was Michael Penix's combine. I was listening to Rick Spielman the other day, and I know when I tweeted this out, Vikings fans said, did you know he drafted Christian Ponder? I do remember that. But Spielman was talking about how he was most impressed with Penix's throwing, but he also mentioned that he heard from friends of his in the league that Penix's medicals were good at the NFL Combine, which I think was the biggest thing for him. So where do we stand now on the second tier of these quarterbacks, Penix, McCarthy, and Bo Nix?
I'm going to be honest with you. I was never really worried about the medicals at all. I mean, we had 2 fully healthy years of Michael Penix. I mean, he seemed to be all good to go. I really wasn't worried. I wasn't afraid that like, wow, they're going to flag something because I feel as though if there was something that was chronic that he was really dealing with that was going to continue to pop up from either the ACL tears or the shoulder injuries that he has gone through, like I feel like we would have seen that over the last 2 years, and we really didn't. I know he played tough and played a little bit hurt towards the end of this past season, but that's just a game of football. I don't think that it was anything that he was dealing with previously that was creeping up again. So I really wasn't too worried about the medicals. The fact that he got clean medicals isn't too big of a shock to me. So I was already kind of depending on that. And, when it comes to his combine performance, on-field throwing at the combine, it seems to be getting a little overblown, like whether you do it or not, and also the performance itself. Like Penix had some really nice throws. I don't want to take anything away from him, but he also had a handful of throws where, yeah, he just barely missed, which is something that I've written on his scouting report. And it felt like a lot of people were like, wow, basically they talked about it like a pro day, right? The perfect, like as if he didn't miss a single pass. And I watched him miss passes when he was in Indianapolis. So I don't know. I feel like I don't know if it's just kind of like selective, like the throws you see versus the throws you don't, whether it's agent speak or just some hype from other people you're talking about. But Penix's stock is all over the place right now, man. I would have told you that I don't think he's going to be a first round pick. Now I don't know because we live in a league where there's 32 teams, right? 31 of them could say, we're not picking this guy until the third round. And if one team says, we're taking him first round, guess what? He's probably going to go in the first round. And we're going to sit here and say, see, the league thought he was a first rounder. Well, maybe the league didn't. That one team did. And I think that is an opportunity here for Penix, because even though I think his stock is anywhere from a mid first round pick to a third round pick, it only takes one team. And so when you're a quarterback, we know that teams are going to lean towards taking you earlier rather than later. So I think the Penix is a really good quarterback. I think he's got a hell of an NFL arm. The two things that I need to see better from him that don't get alleviated from a combine throwing session are, I need you to throw with better ball placement. I guess three things. I need you to throw with better ball placement. The accuracy numbers are fine, but sometimes the wide receivers had to slow up. Sometimes they had to have some acrobatic catches to bring it in. True NFL ball placement. I need him to attack over the middle of the field more, because Washington's offense really, really dominated by throwing outside the numbers, which is fine. But at the NFL level, you got to be able to attack all three layers of the field when it comes to outside the numbers, intermediate, over the middle, and then outside the numbers again. And then the last thing is, he's a good athlete. I think he is a better athlete than people give him credit for, but he just doesn't make comfortable plays consistently outside of the pocket. He likes to stay between the tackles. He likes to be a pocket passer. His passing grade when he was moved was one of the lowest of any quarterback in this class this year. And that's a worry. It's a worry when the league is only getting faster and more versatile from the quarterback position specifically. A lot of these quarterbacks that are coming into the NFL draft, Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy, like just to name a few, these guys are legit players who can run an RPO and tuck it and run, or run a naked bootleg, play action outside of the tackles. You can see if there's some to the sideline, and if there's not, you're picking up 6 yards with your legs. You got to be able to make those kinds of plays to be a priority quarterback in an NFL draft in these days. And Penix just did not make a ton of these past 2 years. So those are three areas that, regardless of how well he threw at the combine, that didn't change that part of his tape for me. So that's still kind of a part of who he is as a prospect.
Right. And I think that when we talk about like the velocity of what he could do with his arm, it's really special. Like that thing comes out fast. It kind of reminds me of Jared Goff in some ways, where if Jared Goff moves at all, the ball just goes right into the turf. And if he could step into it, it isn't always a perfect spiral. It isn't always the perfect ball placement, but it's got great velo. And I think Jared Goff's most underrated, amazing skill is operating and executing an offense. He's just shown with two different teams that if you give him the right offense and the right receivers, he can run an elite offense. There's not too many guys who could do that. So Penix, what's upstairs might matter the most for him if you're going to be that pocket quarterback. I saw that from the PFF data that he had a ton of throwaways, which I think is okay, but you want those to also turn into first downs sometimes, as opposed to just every time you're under pressure, you're throwing the ball away. And I think that the theme with this draft is that these are all prospects who have at least one skill where you could be like, okay, I could see that working. And they also have elements where you go, I could really see that not working. And that's where we lead to JJ McCarthy, because I could see the velocity on his football is really impressive, but you talk about ball placement. When you watched him play, it was a little all over the place. There is the factor of, I trust coaches and what they ask someone to do. And I think that matters. Like just for example, if you were a basketball coach and you said, Trevor, stand over there in the corner and just shoot threes, there's a reason your coach doesn't have you dribbling the ball and driving every time, because if you were great at it, you would. And I think that there is like merit to that discussion with JJ McCarthy. And then there's always the upside. And we're also trying to figure out, is this the guy that is going to be overrated by the draft analysis community like Will Levis was? Or is this actually somebody that the league is falling in love with? And I got to be honest, I don't really truly know still coming out of the combine. I think I could still see that could be truth that he goes to the top 10, or he could be drafted late in the first and we go, wait, where was all that hype for JJ McCarthy? Where do you stand on it?
So I think he's going top 10 at this point. I really do. I think that he's going in the top 10 of the draft. I think there are too many teams that need quarterbacks that aren't going to have the opportunity to fill those needs in free agency and over the next month and a half before draft weekend gets kicked off. So I really do. I think that he's going in the top 10. I think we'll get 4 quarterbacks in the top 10 this year, which is crazy. But I would be much more comfortable picking him back into the first round, but that's just not how it goes, right? Two types of teams in this league. You either have a quarterback or you don't. And so that takes precedence over a lot of other roster building things that you might do throughout the draft. And so I gave him a late first, early second round grade. I was actually really impressed by his 2023 season because this past summer, 2022, I went back and I watched the first year of him as a starter. You know, talk about limited tape. I mean, they didn't really ask him to do a lot at all in 2022. He didn't have good pocket presence. He didn't have a good feel for pressure. He didn't really recognize things pre-snap the way that he needed to. He was slow to get to his progressions post-snap. So there's just a lot of things that he really needed to work on. Nice arm talent, clean mechanics, like that I feel like has always existed through his tape, and it did in 2023 this year. But a lot of those concerns that I had from him in 2022 got better this past year. And he got more aggressive. He got more confident. He was hitting a lot more tight window throws. You talked about, okay, the offense didn't regularly ask him to do this a lot, but he still did it sparingly. He still did it at times, and so you at least see it and you go, okay, so you can do this, right? It's not that you necessarily can't do it. Maybe it is a Michigan thing. So I think a lot of things and his perception got a lot better this past year. So I can see why you throw in his progression this past year. For as much as we like to say that wins aren't a quarterback stat, coaches and GMs love winners. I think he's like 27-1 over the last 2 years. Comes from a program that was headed up by Jim Harbaugh, now a head coach of the NFL, was previously a head coach in the NFL, previously made a Super Bowl, right? This is a dude who understands quarterbacks, praises JJ McCarthy, started him as a true sophomore. So I think all of these things go into his scouting report of why NFL teams would like him more than maybe draft media. Because I think the draft media, we're just looking at the tape, basically. We're not necessarily talking to the Michigan staffers and the rest of his Michigan teammates and, Harbaugh himself and doing all that kinds of due diligence, things like that. We're just watching the tape. And I think when you watch the tape, you see a guy who is worth being picked in the top 50, back end of the first round, early part of the second round. But to project him as a top 10 pick, I think comes down to NFL evaluators hearing things about his football character that they love, that they believe that his best football is ahead of him, that he is truly getting better, that the arrow is going up. And then that progression that we saw from 2023 to 2022 is also going to exist in 2024 and beyond.
Yeah, and when I listened to the guys talk, Penix and McCarthy both stood out to me as far as just how they sort of carry themselves, the confidence in which they answer the questions. They're not going to sound like Baker Mayfield or Kirk Cousins because they're not grown-ups yet. But when you listen to them talk, they kind of have that pro feel a little bit to them. And McCarthy, when he was going on TV and answering questions and getting the question about why he didn't throw very many passes and all those things, I thought he just handled himself really well in that spotlight that is the NFL Combine. And the other thing I think about McCarthy is that the NFL will consider is he was like a hockey player, I guess, and he's played other sports growing up. And also that catch that he made with one hand, like there is a natural athlete, a fluid athlete there that I think that coaches would look at and go, all right, look at that 3-cone score. It was super quick. And look at the way he caught this football and look at this movement, this kind of quick twitchiness that he has. We can develop some of that, inaccuracy and smooth that out. And we have seen that from other natural athlete quarterbacks like Josh Allen, like Jalen Hurts. So I can see the argument for why you'd want to take him and develop him. But as if you just watched the last 4 or 5 games that he played in college football, you'd be like, I'm not sure I really see somebody who is deserving of a top 10 draft pick. But if the Vikings were to take that shot, I'd be very much in support of Kevin O'Connell, JJ McCarthy, make that your franchise and go forward. Give me before I ask you about the defensive line, because that is a problem for the Vikings. And seems like there's a lot of good potential draft picks here. What is your most different take about the projected top 3 than the draft Illuminati? Like, where do you maybe zig where everybody else zags when it comes to Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels? Because it seems like we've kind of locked that in 1, 2, 3. All right, let's talk about the rest. But we never really do know. So where do you feel different than everybody else?
So I don't know how different this is, but I am very clear Caleb's the number one quarterback in this draft. Very clear. Would have no reservations about taking him number one overall. Wouldn't trade the pick if I'm Chicago. I think a lot of teams are going to call up, including Washington at number two. I think Washington's going to put a deal on the table where Chicago is going to have to kind of say no to this and no to drafting Drake May or Jaden Daniels. But if I'm Chicago, I'm not moving off. I'm taking Caleb Williams. I'm working with him. I think he's a franchise caliber quarterback. I think he gets too much hate. Like, yeah, he can't, like, he's got to take care of the football better. And when I say that, I mainly mean fumbles. Just, you got to stop fumbling the football. But a lot of the other stuff that people bring up about Caleb is, he's overblown in my opinion. I think he's a really, really good prospect in a lot of different ways. So he's no question about it, QB1 for me. Drake May is no question about it, QB2 for me. Like, I don't have a debate here with him and Jaden Daniels. Drake May is awesome. He's fearless over the middle of the field. He's got the most big time throws of any of the quarterbacks eligible in this draft over the middle, intermediate middle. So 10 to, I think, 21 yards down the field. Like, he's got 5 big time throws. I think the next closest is like 2. You know, I think he has over 100 passing attempts over that middle of the field as well. Nobody else has over 100. So he's experienced. He understands the value of attacking over the middle of the field. He's got good mobility to him. I mean, the ball just rockets off of his wrist. I think he's got arm talent for days. I think the weird part about Drake May is that there are passes in his tape that he just misses. And I think that it really freaks NFL evaluators out because you'll watch some of these passes and it's not his footwork. It's not his release. His mechanics are clean. He got to it on time. The ball just didn't go exactly where it was supposed to go. Like, it was just a little bit out of reach. He just missed him by a little bit. He just misjudged it, whatever. And I think people freak out when they see stuff like that, mistakes, and they can't go, oh, we'll see, like, if we fix his footwork, it's good to go. Like, he'll never miss that throw again. When in reality, I think a lot of quarterbacks miss a lot of throws, but May has more of those throws that he just misses for whatever reason than a lot of these other quarterbacks. Now, it's not rampant. It's not like it's an epidemic in his tape, but they exist, and I think it kind of freaks people out a little bit. Most of his tape, though, phenomenal. Wouldn't think about it. QB2, easy, would sleep well at night. Jaden, I think, is getting overhyped in this class. I do. And I think that he is a talented football player. I love the trajectory that he has been on since his Arizona State days, his first year at LSU, and then what we saw this past season. I absolutely love that from him. But doesn't really attack over the middle of the field very well. A lot of his production comes from those like slot fades, fade balls on the outside, and those are, I don't want to take that away from him, but he's also thrown to 2 top 20 receivers in Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. So that connection, it's great there, but what happens if he goes to a team that doesn't necessarily have that wide receiver situation? Does it look different? He's got to take care of himself better. He's got to take care of the ball better, and he's got to get bigger and he's got to get stronger, I think, if he's going to survive at the NFL level. Like Lamar, we've seen that over the last couple of years as well, and don't take that as like a Lamar 1-for-1 comp, but Lamar was pretty skinny when he came in the league, and Lamar has put on some weight. Like Lamar, in a good way. I mean, like, he's gotten stronger, he's gotten thicker. I think he's gotten more durable, and I think that gives him more confidence when he's out on the field. It's allowed him to slow the game down a little bit because he does have that extra muscle. He's got that extra strength to him. So Jaden needs to do that as well. And elite production this past year, elite passing grade, elite rushing grade. It's all phenomenal. It is 1 year, right? Like, we also got to be honest. And I know Joe Burrow was kind of in the same situation. Joe Burrow worked out, but Jaden Daniels was probably a day 3 pick before this past season. And he has 1 year where he just goes absolutely nuclear, wins a Heisman Trophy, and he should have, deservingly so. If you want to talk about that guy as QB3 to take a chance on in the top half of the first round, I'd get it. We're now talking about him over Drake May, and I cannot get there. I cannot get there with the level of conversation that we're having about Jaden. So really talented football player, but I guess that's just an overview of how I see that top 3. I'm no question about it. Caleb is 1. I'm no question about it. Drake is 2. And then Jaden Daniels for me is a little bit further down as QB3.
Yeah, with Jaden Daniels, I've wondered, and there's always something that's different than what we expect with the quarterback class. And it's like, what is it? What's it going to be? And there is probably a world where Jaden Daniels is maybe not as high for some teams than we think he is because of the year he put out there. For me, the ball just doesn't come out. And when I watch, and of course you've covered the NFL, you watch enough NFL games and you go, all right, drop back, there's the routes, there's the play, ball comes out. There's the play, ball comes out. And so when you watch a college quarterback, and they all take longer to get the ball out, so that happens for everybody, but it's like, come on, and all right, throw, are you gonna, and then a lot of times, even on a route, it'll be quite a bit late on where it was supposed to be, but the go routes are absolutely magical. And it reminds me of watching Tyrod Taylor. And I'm not trying to say that's what he's going to be. That's not what the ceiling is, but it might be the median outcome. Is like, you're really special running the football and you're really special throwing deep routes, but you get yourself killed all the time because you hang on to the ball forever. And Tyrod Taylor was a quarterback who could take a team to the playoffs, but he was not a quarterback who could take a team much farther than that. And there were some limitations. You could also bring up Justin Fields, who gets sacked at an absolutely comical level. Like, that could be the same thing with Jaden Daniels in the NFL, where he just gets sacked all the time. And a lot of it is, how much of this can you fix? Like with any of these quarterbacks, how much are you capable of fixing? Are you capable of fixing getting the ball out on time? Because even Patrick Mahomes is known for his scrambling. What percentage of his throws come out in 2 seconds? I mean, you would know this for PFF data. I bet it's 70%. I bet it's almost, 7 out of 10 throws are coming out really quick. And then 1 out of 10, it's special. He does something crazy. You can't do something crazy all the time.
Right.
So I think that there is more risk with Jaden Daniels than the other quarterbacks.
Yes.
But the upside is, if he is Lamar Jackson, then you've got yourself an MVP. So, I could see where a team would take him number 3 overall.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up the arm strength part of it too, because I think that his arm strength is adequate, but I don't think it's close to what Caleb Williams is or Drake May. Honestly, Jaden is way closer to JJ McCarthy than he is Drake May and Caleb Williams to me. He's way closer to that. And if you wanted to tell me that JJ McCarthy is your QB3, I would not push that far back on you, because I have those guys pretty close. Now, the difference is I have Drake May and Caleb Williams as top 5 and top 10 overall grades. And then QB3 for me is like late first, early second. And that's kind of around, I think his numbers might have kind of bumped him into just that, like, just round 1 label, like first round grade, as opposed to a late first, early second. But he's right there. I mean, him and McCarthy are right there. So again, if you told me that you've got McCarthy over Daniels, I'm not pushing that far back on you. It's just weird to hear that, because we all think that a quarterback is going to go 3 overall. We all think that the draft is going to start with 3 QBs in a row. So whoever your QB3 is, whether you have a first round grade on him, late first, early second, or second round grade, we think that person's going number 3 overall. So when you say out loud, oh, I have JJ McCarthy over Jaden Daniels, people would freak out about it, just because that, like, what you're saying means that McCarthy would go 3, and then they'd be like, McCarthy's not worth 3 overall. It's like, well, hold on. That's not what I said. I just told you my QB rankings. And so people, I think, need to remember that part of it too when we have these conversations, is that it's still about the overall big board. It's about the round grades that you have on them. It's not necessarily, here's my 1, here's my 2, here's my 3, because in reality, the gap between a lot of those guys could be big and small.
See, you answered the question. I mean, the question was, where do you differ from the draft industrial complex? And I think that does go a little bit off of the trail there. So let's wrap on this. The Vikings also need an entire defensive line. And what I noticed from the combine is, holy moly, there are some freaking athletes in this draft at every position. We got the fastest player ever. We got fat offensive linemen running sub 540s. For some reason, they still run 40s. I don't know why, but I'm in to watch it. But the defensive linemen, I thought, did themselves a lot of favors. Chop Robinson really standing out. And my favorite guy in the class for defensive line, if the Vikings could find a way, if they don't draft a quarterback at 11, because Trey Lance is their future quarterback, then for me, it's Dallas Turner. I think Dallas Turner is like the guy. I like him a little bit better than everybody else at that position. If the Vikings were at 11, it's the first defensive player potentially off the board with the way that everything could fall. But there are other options. Jared Verse is here. Byron Murphy, I would not argue with the defensive tackle. How do you kind of lay this out with the defensive line class? And if the Vikings weren't going to get one at 11, what are we talking about for depth of the defensive line? Like, could they get one at 42?
Yeah, I think that, when you look at these top edge rushers in this class, I think Jared Verse and Dallas Turner really put on a show. Turner obviously was a top performer in basically every explosive category. You had the 10-yard split, the 40-yard dash, the vertical jump, the broad jump, and that shows up on Turner's tape, right? I think that when you look at the debates between Dallas Turner, Jared Verse, and UCLA's Laiatu Latu for who would be edge one in this class, each one of them has something else that they boast, right? I think that Turner has the best overall athleticism, explosiveness, arm length, and bend. He has that potential of like that mold. Verse, his power profile is fantastic. I mean, he's just strong as an ox. He's dense. When he runs into an offensive tackle, man, they feel it. He's going to be that heavy-handed 4-3 defensive end who I think can defend the run really well. I think he can get after it with a nasty bull rush, and he's got some good pass rush moves to him as well. But he's the more power player versus what Dallas Turner is an explosive athlete. And then the finesse god is Laiatu Latu, who is not necessarily the best athlete in the world. We saw that with some of his combine testing, but over 23% pass rush win percentage over the last 2 years, 95.0 pass rush grade over the last 2 years, which is just absolutely ridiculous. His pass rush bag, his pass rush profile is as deep as they come, and he just understands pass rushing so well. So all three of those guys, it just depends what your cup of tea is, right? What kind of flavor of an edge rusher that you want there. I think Dallas Turner is going to end up being my edge one in this class. Certainly testing confirmed a lot of the things that I love about him. The big question mark that I have with Turner is how much strength is he going to play with at the NFL level? Because I asked him specifically about his playing weight journey while he was at Alabama. He said he showed up to Alabama at 260 pounds, but he kind of laughed and he said it wasn't a good 260. Like it was a COVID 260. Like I was not in shape. I was a big boy. And so he had to lose a bunch of weight. He said his freshman year, he ended up starting playing at 240. So he's lighter, he was faster, so he lost 20 pounds. He was playing at 240. And you could tell he really had only a speed profile to him. The same can be said about his sophomore year. Used a long arm technique, used his burst off the line of scrimmage, but he was really just attacking the outside shoulder or maybe giving you inside spin counter. But it was just speed moves. And he was playing, he said, at 245 that year. This past year, he said he played between 252 and 255. So he was bigger, and you could see that on tape. He had a little bit more power to him. But I asked, what's your most comfortable playing weight? And he said, I like playing at 245 the most. So you have to take his sophomore tape from his 245 days and say, is this player strong enough for us? Like, are we good enough here? Because that's where he wants to play. He wants to be a speed rusher. So I think a lot of people that looked at Turner this past year and said, okay, he was at 255, he was playing a lot more powerful. You might not get that preferably when he gets to the NFL level. You have to, I think, evaluate him as more of, are you okay with him being a speed rusher? And if you are, some people might still, for him being edge one in the class. That's just something that you have to think about there. So I think he'd be a great addition to the Vikings. I think he could absolutely go in that range between picks. I think his range probably starts at 8 with the Atlanta Falcons. I think 9's consideration for the Chicago Bears as well. And then I think obviously Minnesota sitting there at 11. I think all those three teams will have him pretty high on their board.
I love that you describe someone as dense. Like that's whatever I'm like the opposite of that. Like that is my body type.
Right. So no, look, so am I. I was I was playing, man, so this is a long time ago now. I was playing like flag football, and I was playing against somebody who was being a real try hard about it. And he lines up in press coverage against me, and I knew that he had played some sort of like, I don't know, like D2 football before, whatever. And I've got my hands out. And so the ball gets hiked, and it's flag football, but we're getting a little bit physical when we're up at the line of scrimmage. So I kind of get my hands on him, and he just takes his forearm and breaks my forearm, not like physically, but like just it gets me off of him. And that hurt so bad. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And that was at that moment that I realized that even, D2, D3 football players, they've got dense muscles, they've got dense bodies. And I just was not built like that. So you saying that reminded me of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it kind of is like if you play pickup basketball and you play against somebody who played like D2 or something and they put 50 on everybody and you're like, "Oh yeah. Yeah, but I could definitely score 10 in the NBA or whatever TikTok guys say." But it's like the picture of that offensive lineman standing next to all the reporters. You're like, "Yeah, I don't think normal people would want to go out on that field." Anyway, Trevor, I could sit here and ask you just about player after player after player. You take such a great approach to the NFL draft. I cannot recommend enough the PFF NFL draft guide. Make sure you check it out. Tons of data, tons of analysis, a ridiculous amount of work that you guys put into it. So thanks so much for coming on. It was great to see you in Indianapolis, and we'll definitely talk again soon, man. Appreciate it.
Matthew, it was great to be on a podcast with my favorite author, whose book I am flying through right now. And if anybody has not read the book on Pro Football Focus that Matthew wrote, you should absolutely do it because I'm loving it, and you should go out and buy it. But it was great to be on the podcast with you, my friend. Anytime.
Appreciate that, man. Football.